Hi, everybody. Welcome to Busy Living Sober. Busy Living Sober. Busy Living Sober. Episode 195. Pretty exciting
Oh,
stuff. With Mike Collins, or do you go by Michael?
Mike's fine, yeah.
Mike's fine. Mike is from the sugaraddiction.com. That's his website. And I want to hear about your story, Mike, that brought you to the realization that sugar maybe was the first and the foremost. Because before we were recording, he talked about how it started in the womb. So tell us, what was it like? What happened? And what is it like today?
I love that line. Well, I grew up a small child. Now, look, my mom was the biggest sugar junkie on the planet. A lovely, lovely woman, but she just couldn't put down the sugar. Her mother died when she was 8 years old. The deal that they made, typical Irish Catholic, literally first generation Irish Catholic family. The deal they made was anytime she walked across the street to the country store, she could have anything for free, and he'd put it on the father's tab because he was just felt guilt stricken. So that never changed her whole life. She was just equated emotions with sugar. Like sadness, their mom was gone, whatever it was sugar. And this is a novel theme that we'll revisit as we talk. But so, I grew up, she gained 60 pounds with my birth on a 105-pound frame. And talking later, that basically all she ate was sugar products, right? And she had a sugar stash all over the house, and we knew where it was. And we had unfettered access to the sugar bowl. We could literally, if we didn't have a half an inch of sugar in the milk on top of the, when we got done with the Cheerios and the cornflakes, we didn't put enough sugar on it. We could make Kool-Aid with 3 times the recipe amount, anything we wanted with the white sugar that was in the house. We couldn't really afford the snacky snacks, but we could have that white sugar, and there was always sugar there. And so there's a great YouTube video your folks would love. Eric Clapton, the famous guitar player, recovering famous guitar player, in his $7 million Antigua treatment center, talking to Ed Bradley of 60 Minutes. And Ed Bradley says, Eric, so this addiction thing, it all started with heroin, right? And he says, no, Ed, it started with sugar. He says, I was 5 or 6 years old, and I would eat bread and butter and sugar sandwiches to change my state, anything to change my state. Well, we used to eat bread and butter and sugar sandwiches, brown sugar as well, and then cinnamon ones as well, put it on the toast. And so an entire childhood of this. I mean, every candy, ice cream, cookie that you can think of, we had. And we were doing cookie dough before it was cool and before it was sold in stores. We were eating it on Saturdays when we made oatmeal chocolate chip cookies, my mother's favorite. So, fast forward to 14 years old, and I run into beer right now. During this time period, I didn't really know that I was changing my state. I just thought, like most people, both in recovery, out of recovery, in America, and in the world, they don't sugar is a very mild mood elevator, right? So it doesn't really it's not like you're going to drink beer and, but I realized that I could talk to girls, my whole state changed. And so that party lasted, and I will answer any questions. I'm an open book, but till I was 28 years old, right? And I got sober. And so then, I literally went right back to the sugar. I mean, literally when I was drinking, I didn't really use that much. I didn't have much of a sweet tooth. I didn't really need it, to be honest with you. I mean, in hindsight. And I mean, I ate a little, but nothing out of the ordinary. My old girlfriend used to say, every time we have spaghetti and meatballs, and say, you want to go out for ice cream. So the thing was there, it was hiding underneath, right, when I wasn't drinking. And so, I just started, I gained 20 pounds just like that, just like everybody in recovery, the freshman 15 or the freshman 50, or we gain weight really fast in the first couple of years of recovery. And it's because we all substitute. It's even in the big book, twice in the big book that, sugar helps. And so, recovery meetings are like a freaking sugar smorgasbord. And so, I read a book at that time called Sugar Blues. And Sugar Blues is the story of this guy. He's at a party, right? And he's putting 2 lumps of sugar in his coffee, and this voice from behind says, I wouldn't have that in my house, let alone my body. It turns out it's Glorious. You knew the voice. It's Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star, right?
Oh my.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they end up marrying her third husband, and they end up marrying, and they promote this book, Sugar Blues, all over the world. And I read that book in the early 80s when I got sober. And it just kind of stuck. I don't know, God put it in my head or whatever. It's just like, I love the history lesson that, England grew the largest empire in the world on the backs of sugar and slavery. They would go from England with empty boats, pick up slaves, go to the Caribbean and South America and stuff, get the sugar and the rum and molasses and come back, and literally grew the largest empire in the world, bigger than El Chapo or anybody, bigger than any, drug cartel. And I don't know, that tripped my trigger, but I just did. And so I ended up raising 2 kids sugar-free from the womb. I married a woman at the time in recovery, and she just bought into it all. So we no sugar, no flour, no caffeine in the womb until they were 6 years old. And that experiment worked, by the way. If you want to ask questions about that, I'm happy to answer it. But yeah, and then for the last 20 years or 20 years after that, I just had a regular life. I went on, had business. I didn't drink, I didn't use drugs, and I didn't use sugar and flour and caffeine. And about 10 years ago, I said, my kids always say, you should write a book about sugar, Dad. And I'm like, yeah, well, sure. And so I bought sugaraddiction.com, the URL, the domain name, and wrote a book. It's on Amazon about sugar addiction and sugar detox. And here we are. So that's the story. It usually brings up more questions than it answers, but there you go.
Okay, I want to ask you this. So,
Yeah.
as you mentioned there briefly, an AA meeting is a smorgasbord of sugar products.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it. I mean, you go there, like, I know in California when it's somebody's anniversary, they have cakes, right? They have cakes there. When you go to meetings anywhere in the world, they have cookies, they have donuts, they have all these different things. How did you say no?
I don't, I can tell you my clean day from alcohol and drugs, but I can't exactly tell you my clean day. I know it's over 30 years because my kids are older than 30 years. So I know when that one is, or I sort of know where it is. But I had some problems. Let me tell you, I used to go to, you talk about meetings. I used to go to these black belt AA meetings. They were men's meetings, right? And they'd say, sit down, shut up, and you don't have a right to talk till you get 90 days sober. And I'm like, I kind of figured I needed that at that time, but I started talking after 90 days, and they said, I'd start talking about the sugar stuff, and they'd say, Mike, are you sober today? I said, yeah. I said, don't worry about the damn sugar, But I don't know. I really don't know. It was an on again, off again process for a couple, 2-3 years. I was in recovery 2 or 3 or 3 years, maybe longer, before I got off of sugar and flour. And it would take me, like, I'd go a month and back and forth. So I didn't have any compadres. I used to go to a couple of the food meetings, but I didn't relate to the folks too much. But I just eventually stopped it all. And I would read whatever was out, but between Sugar Blues and Dr. Lustig last 7 years ago, there wasn't a lot. The big food manufacturers had done their job well, and there wasn't a lot of information about sugar being that bad for you. So I kept up with some of it, but I don't know. I just turned it, I'm an abstinence-based guy. So when I do something, I guess I do it all the way.
But you're lucky because I can just speak for myself. Like, it's like I already gave up booze. Like, you want me to give up sugar too? You want me to give up cigarettes too? Like, enough. Like, I need a caffeine. I mean, give me a break. That's like really hard. And the fact that you are saying to me, like, you just did it. It's just amazing. Like, did you pray a lot? Like, what did you do?
Well, here's the thing. I did audit, so like I said, some 12-step meetings, and I call myself a 12-step anthropologist, not, like some of my mentors, but, what I studied, I knew a lot about NA and AA and all that kind of stuff, and I liked that history lesson and all that, but I really studied the food groups. And what happened in the food groups is an interesting story your customers, your clients, your listeners might like. is OA you can name your own abstinence. In other words, you can eat sugar on the weekends, you can do whatever, right? But I used to see people suffering so badly 20 years in, 15 years in, because, I went out, I had sugar and I did that, But there was 3 offshoot groups: Food Addicts Recovery Anonymous, Food Addicts Anonymous, and CEA How, and the Gray Sheeters, 4 of them, offshoots of AA. And they named your abstinence. They said, no sugar, no flour, and some of them weigh and measure food, right? But no sugar, no flour. And anecdotally and by accident, they discovered, I believe, the cure for this issue, right? And so I went to a couple of their conventions, and I was interested in their model, how they did it over the years. And I think that was the answer, really. I could see that 100% abstinence was the answer because these are people who lost 200 and 300 pounds, and they had to go through the exact same recovery you and I did. I mean, emotional recovery, emotional healing, that kind of stuff. It wasn't just, quit something. It was, there's other parts to it. And they went through exactly what we went through. So I was a student of it the whole time. And I think that kept me off of it.
Because it's hard. I mean, I know for myself, I've tried to do it. I mean, with the Atkins diets, keto, I know that's something we talk about,
Right.
Keto, and like, I'm going to do keto. I'm somebody that's battled, the whole weight thing the whole time. And I truly, I get to that place where I'm like, oh my God, it's hard. I mean, so I commend you. That's amazing. And I'm sure like your kids, like, I can't even imagine, like, were you like the person that went to school and made sure, like, when they were handing out the cupcakes, like, no cupcakes for these? Or did they, like, that's hard.
It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. We fought the Montessori school. We fought their own grandparents. We fought other kids' parents because they genuinely thought we were, and they had like a passionate argument that we were depriving them of some pleasure of childhood. Right? But I just really believe that, that first 1,000 days, and these are, I'm kind of a health guy anyway. So I was reading about science and health and wellness and all that kind of stuff. And those first 1,000 days, your brain grows. I can't remember the numbers, but it's gigantic, like percentage. It's still developing so much in those first 1,000 days. My kids were reading books before they were 3 years old. They are card carrying, perfect scores on their college entrance exam, geniuses. And I just believe that their brain developed better. I'm not that smart. I mean, all right, but I'm not that, I was a lot closer to average than I was to that shit. I mean, and their mother too, so the experiment, I think, worked, so it's like, and, I don't think, they don't say that they were deprived to this day. And I just don't think that, here's the thing, and we'll talk about it maybe a little bit later, but neural pathways are grooved in your brain at those ages, right? They're, you think about worry, you think about fear, you think about stress. My mother had 4 kids under 8 at one time, in her life, right? And so she would give you a cookie and point you to there's a TV, and she didn't have time to get down on the level, give you a hug, whatever. And a lot of parents find themselves that, today busy. The bottom line is that now just those anecdotal 4 recovery groups I told you about discovered it in dusty church basements, right? Well, Dr. Lustig and all the super researchers that we have on our sugar summits, Harvard, Cornell, everybody, now the science is telling us why this happens, right? Why you can't quit, why you can't stay stopped from sugar, right? And it's no different than alcohol, no different than heroin, no different than any drug, cocaine. The same brain reward systems light up in your brain when you use sugar. And it's dose dependent, right? So we do a little alcohol, we do a little heroin, we do a little cocaine, but we are doing 17 to 20 teaspoons a day average. That's average. That's not somebody that's probably overweight and doing a lot more. That's before you get to flour, which turns to sugar in your stomach. So we are grooving, we're hitting dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine in our brains over and over and over again. And we learn that when we are upset, when we are feeling angst or whatever, that unconsciously, now, because it's free and almost ubiquitous, we can always reach for sugar somewhere in our home or, for a buck at the 7-Eleven. And so this pattern developed. And that's it, man. It's just simple patterning. And, until we figure out, people, Raji Dater, I get no respect, right? I get no respect. It's like, yeah, see, you laugh. I didn't even tell the joke. All I had to say, I get no respect, right? It's like sugar gets no respect as a psychoactive drug until you talk to somebody who's lost 200 pounds. And then they say, I'm scared to death of sugar because I was 200 pounds. And when I quit it, I went to a right-sized body, right? So, yeah, I mean, we are in the beginnings of a tectonic shift, like drinking and driving, seatbelts in cars, and that kind of stuff. We're smoking in public places. The science says this now, and the science is what I'm standing on, the shoulders of giants, basically. So,
well, it's so fascinating because this is obviously not the first time I've heard this, right? So I mean, but it is such, it's, and I'm going to use COVID because we are living in a pandemic. So people are at home and, life is tough right now for a lot of people, right? It's tough. I mean, families are separating, kids aren't going back to school. Life is pretty dramatic in our houses. And, sugar makes you feel good. You mentioned that. It makes you feel good, right? I
think it's the perfect drug, man. I really do. It's just, it doesn't get you buzzy. It just makes you feel good.
No, it doesn't.
Actually, I think when you actually kind of go through the recovery and then you slip, you do get this high, like you had 2 martinis, right? And right now, all we're doing is trying to get back to normal. Think about it. We're not trying to get that buzz anymore. We just don't want to feel bad. We just want to feel just about normal, And that's what sugar does when you get to be our age, when you get to be an adult. And this happens when people experience relapse with sugar. They're like, I was stoned, I was high. And so, yeah, I think it is more powerful than people realize. It's just that when your dopamine stuff heals up a little bit, then all of a sudden you get this wicked blast of dopamine or serotonin or GABA, or, all of the brain reward chemicals are affected, And that's what we're doing. We're doing drugs. We're not like, the cocaine doesn't get you high. The alcohol doesn't get you high. It's the blast of dopamine and serotonin that gets you the inebriation,
How does one go out for dinner when you are, because that's the part, I mean, I know for me, I'm really social being, so I'm just going to use myself as your dummy. So, I go to dinner at least, like right now, my kitchen's torn apart. My life is totally upside down. So we are ordering takeout all the time. So what do you do when you have that lifestyle? And I can't cook. It's too much.
I had to start an Instagram account. It's just getting started. What does the sugar-free man eat? Because I get that question so much. What do you eat? Like, what do you eat? You can't eat bread. You can't eat flour, pasta, rolls, none of that kind of stuff.
That's usually the easy stuff. But that's the easy stuff you're talking about, right? Like that, anybody that's walking down the street knows, okay, I can't have ice cream. I can't have bread. I can't go to Italian. I can't have pizza.
Well, I mean, it's like this pandemic, it's worse than the pandemic we're currently in, has then gone from almost 0 to 84% or 80+% of the food products on the shelves contain sugar. And it contains sugar because food scientists, the guys that write this book and won a Pulitzer Prize, there's food scientists on the other side that are trying to figure out the best way to keep you hooked to whatever you're eating, Doritos or, mac and cheese, whatever it is. They're trying to get enough sugar in it that you keep coming back. The answer to your question is it's hard at the beginning, but you can do it. There are things that you can say in the rest. And one of the things I always say is, and in 20 some odd years, over 30 years, I've never had anybody complain. They actually come to my aid, and 2 have actually said, do you have diabetes? He said, does this have sugar in it? I can't have sugar. That's all I got to say is I can't have sugar. And then it's like, they light up, they run back to the kitchen, they find out what's going on for you. 2 of them said, I have diabetes too, or do you have diabetes? But that's only happened a couple of times. So there's tricks, and honest to goodness, what you just brought up is one of the core principles that we teach in coaching and in our support systems, is that it's really about, like, meetings and stuff. It's about the social supports. It's really important part of it, because everyone is doing it, or whatever you want to put it. It's like the entire society is coated in sugar in the food industry. The history is very interesting. If you read a little bit about, you talked about keto, if you read those folks, this all started in the 40s, when they needed to make K rations for the troops. And so they came back, and those guys had cranked up these giant machines to give food to the guys, right? Well, now we're in the 50s, and women are getting into the workplace more, and they started to grow a processed food industry, right? And so they didn't really start putting sugar heavily into it until the 70s and 80s, and high fructose corn syrup. But like I said, I really like the history stuff, and I always like to see, how do we get in this mess? So how can we get out, right? And so you can see the evolution, how it happened, kind of innocently, really. These guys had a shareholder value to maximize. People liked it. They bought it. It was okay. And the science wasn't there. So now, presented with the science, we've got to realize that, what's that, like, Zen kind of saying, the guru guy, it's like, it's not okay to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society, right? It's like the science, I don't know about you, but when I was young, drinking and driving was not, you were not the pariah, you were, right. It was just, don't get caught, right? They'd pat you on the head and say, drive slow, don't get caught. Yeah, don't get the DWI, right? That was my reality growing up, right? And same with, like, seatbelts in cars. Same with seatbelts in cars. When I was young, it was like, my mother would freaking whack us. Like, she's like afraid we were going to fall forward. So she, literally in her 70s, almost 80, she's driving along, and she's got to stop quick. The arm still goes at 70, right? She's got the automatic arm, right? I'm like, what the hell? And so, but now science says seatbelt's good for you. And everybody, you get in the car right now at our age, you don't have your seatbelt on, your 8-year-old's going to say, put your damn seatbelt on. So it's a different world, right? And that's where we're headed with the sugar. We are on the right side of history, Liz. I'm telling you.
Well, I'm excited about that, because I can say, I don't eat any of those things, like those processed things that you're talking about, right? So I don't get the Doritos, I don't get any of those things. But then you buy you think it's organic, and it says organic on it, or non-GMO, and you're like, oh, this is healthy. But then at the same time, you're still getting, if you buy the organic flour that came from this, and you paid $25 for the bag of it, right? It's better for you, but it's the same stuff that's in the gold bag that doesn't say, right?
Exactly. It's exactly right. And, God bless their soul, is Southern saying there, but, the food manufacturer have done a great job obfuscating, I don't know if you like that word, but the idea that this stuff's bad for you for 30 years, and now they're getting called to task. But yeah, I mean, people don't realize the health food stuff is probably worse than the regular stuff, because they have so many names for sugar, like agave syrup, right? Agave syrup is freaking they make tequila out of agave, for God's sake. It's 70-80% fructose, the worst part of the chemical molecule that is sugar. Like, just for your listeners, table sugar is half fructose and half glucose, right? Well, we need glucose, but you don't need chemical glucose. You don't need powdered glucose. You need glucose from fruits and from vegetables, right? And so the fructose, though, is now, especially with high fructose corn syrup coming in the 80s, and it's the fructose that now we're starting to realize this fructose cannot be processed anywhere in the body except the liver. Now, does this sound familiar, right? And children now are getting fatty liver disease, right? And so finally, the science is, the MRIs, you can see that your brain lights up the same with the fructose as it does with the cocaine or the alcohol, right? And it's the fructose that really is the reason you can't quit. It's the psychoactive part of it, right? We know what glucose is giving us diabetes and probably Alzheimer's and heart disease and cancer and all that kind of stuff. But people always want to know, well, why can't I quit? Why does the cravings keep drawing me back? Why can't I live a life without it after you've been acclimated? Because you're going to have actual withdrawals. You're going to have withdrawal symptoms. You're going to feel down. You're going to have pause, post-acute withdrawal syndrome, for maybe a month or two, till your dopamine receptors, what they do is called thinned out. They're down-regulated is the scientific term. And so you have less of them. And so you're trying to get back to, through exercise, hydration, and nutrition, you're trying to get back to more, feeling just normal, like we talked about. I just want to have my normal, like what I would feel if my dopamine receptors were acting normally instead of being down-regulated. And that takes a little time. You can't go 40 years in sugar and then all of a sudden hope in 2 months that your dopamine receptors have just popped right back. Doesn't happen that way, right? So yeah, I mean, it's after being immersed in it pretty heavily for the last decade, I'm, I can see a little bit more of it. I mean, I think the important thing is the work that you're doing, helping me get this message out, but it ain't rocket science anymore. The science is there, the science is truly there to defend all this.
So I have a challenging question for you, Mike.
Sure.
So
I've heard them all, by the way, but go ahead.
Oh, come on, give me some originality here. So maybe, who knows? So I just quit drinking. I'm totally uncomfortable. I just gave up my best friend. And what you were just describing of those withdrawals and everything, that didn't sound comfortable, did it? And we don't like feeling uncomfortable as addicts, especially, I'm just going to say for myself as an addict, right? I don't like those feelings of insecure. For one, I didn't even know what those words were when I got sober, but anxiety, whatever, all those words. Yeah. So I'm feeling, but the bottom line is I'm uncomfortable. And now I have these feelings and all I want to do is do something. So I want to do something. And so we say to them, go get an ice cream cone, go to a candy bar. What is your recommendation to tell them to go get?
So it is a good question. And it is, again, the fourth pillar. There's four pillars. That's one of the pillars of what we teach. And it's self-care. Essentially, it's just a process of self-care. So let me kind of start from the beginning, really. What we're doing, both with alcohol and drugs and with sugar, is we have co-opted or opted out of our own emotional management systems, right? The one that we were supposed to learn as a child on how to soothe ourselves. In other words, how to go out and go play, go swimming, go to yoga, go run, things that usually most to require to pick up a nice dopamine buzz or serotonin or get your adrenals going. Usually takes physical exercise. Not necessarily. You can get a hug, you can make love. There's a lot of things that you can do that will get your, make you feel better. Get a massage, get a mani-pedi, things where you're pampered, where you're taking care of yourself, right? And it's these things that we have outsourced, co-opted to sugar and these kind of things, because you can just sit on the couch and eat the sugar and get the same feelings that would require to walk around the block or walk the dog, right? And so this is what you just brought up, really, is the major breaking point for when people finally get that, as far as, I'm not concerned about their using, I'm concerned about what are they, when they say they need something like that, they need to feel better, they need to think, I need a dopamine hit and how can I get one, right? And I need even better ones, serotonin. I mean, we've all heard of SSRIs, a serotonin selective reuptake, right? And these are Paxil and all these kind of things. These are the nastiest drugs that God ever created. These things are terrible because you know what they do, right? They dial it in. So if this one doesn't work, they put you on another one. And if this dose doesn't work, they put you on another one, right? I always tell this story. So you're going to a concert, right? And you got a little pot, little Coke, little beer, little whiskey, little pot, little beer. What is the goal? Not when the first band comes on, at 9:30 when the main band comes on. It's to have dialed in all your drugs so you're not falling down and you're feeling perfect when the band comes on, right? This is what we do all day, every day with sugar, flour, and caffeine. We're trying to dial in the emotional balance that should have been and will, again, in recovery, come from exercise, hydration, connection, community, love, self-care, just basic human self-care. And we got to get back to it, or not get back to it. A lot of people have to start it again, or, for the first time. So it's not that complicated. I mean, but it does take some work to separate it out, to know which is which, to know that you can't use that product anymore.
So 90 days, you do your first, because, we're all about 90 and 90, right? We're like, you do 90 and 90, and you're going to feel so much better. You're not going to have these cravings anymore. Can you say that when you start doing you get off the sugar and the flour?
We actually call it the gift of 90 days because, yes. Now, there are some people, especially heavy caffeine addicts, that it's almost like a meth withdrawal. It lasts for 6 months or more sometimes. And yeah, it's really kind of bad. And sugar too, depending on how big your habit was, how big your mother's habit was, whether your body has ever been ever had an experience of not having it, it takes a longer time. But most people, 90 days is a good number. We try and get them. We have bronze, silver, and gold. So it's 30 days bronze, 60 days silver, 90 days gold. If you get to gold, pretty much, I mean, what I found is you really still need to hang around the community. You can't just like go off on your own. This is lore. This is scientific diet history lore, where if someone loses a lot of weight, they 90+%, closer to 95% of the folks always gain it back in the first year and then some. And the reason that happens is because of the things you and I are talking about. It's okay, I muscled it through. This is even a big loser study, CDC peer-reviewed big loser study, where all the folks that were on the big loser that lost all that weight, all but 2 gained it all back within the first year or 2. And that's because they were muscle, grit their teeth, white knuckling it. And then they lost the weight. They did the exercise. They were sequestered. And so, the average person doesn't have that opportunity. And when they do muscle it and they do white knuckle it, if they don't do the things that we've been discussing, get the self-care regimens in place, get the community and tribe in place so they can have somebody to talk to, because 9 out of 10 times their family's not going to do it with them. They're going to be in a family where either they're cooking for or living with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other people, a spouse who's not on board with this program. And that's, we all know about Al-Anon, but this is the same kind of deal. It's hard. It's hard when you don't have a group around you. So
hard when you don't have a cheerleader. And you don't have a buddy, right?
Yeah.
Sponsor, somebody like that.
Accountability, a sponsor, right?
Yeah. So, or I just heard the best one. Wait a minute, what is it called? A fellow traveler.
Yeah, I like that one. I actually use that word, that term. I like the term.
Yeah, I like that. I like the fellow traveler. How much does it cost to do your program?
$97. It's cheap. The important part is the back end. Is the Zoom meetings and the Facebook groups and that kind of stuff. I mean, you can do one-on-one coaching for more, but 80% of our folks don't need that. They just join the group and that's it.
And off they go.
I got a bunch of recovering people too. I mean, I got coaches that are recovering, people that are like, Mike, this is to a man, to a woman. Every single one of them said, Mike, quitting sugar was a lot harder than quitting drugs.
I would tell you right now, I have done it because I've done those keto. I've done South Beach. I've done all those, Dr. Atkins, all that stuff, right? So I've done all those. And like the first week you want your spouse to stay away. They're like, oh my God, should I come in with the shield? Because you're going to kill me, right? And it's hard. And we do not live in a society that promotes, it's not like we don't live in a society that promotes not drinking. And we don't live in a society that promotes, not eating sugar. And the one
No.
thing that I want to mention one more thing is that, and I just thought about it right now, is like, the mocktail industry, right? So that mocktail, making our cocktails
Yeah.
in a pretty glass. And
That's
I
sugar tail, they should call
that's what it is. And I
it.
was making them all the time. And the reality was I don't drink sugary drinks. I drink Pellegrino, or I drink, Topo Chico. And neither of them
Yeah,
have
I
any
like
sugar
that.
or anything in it, right? Those are my drinks.
Yeah.
And so I was doing these drinks, and it was like I wasn't even really drinking them, because all they were syrup, right? They were all syrup, just with a different flavor that you added.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. One of the things that is a problem with the keto world and with the diet world in general, paleo, all of them, is they have these keto desserts, right? And they're like, it's just crap, I mean, it's orchestrated to look like and trigger you like the old stuff. It's like, keto cheesecake. Now, come on, how do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I mean, you can theoretically make it with, and we have a problem, I got my start, as I kind of mentioned, in people with late stage food addiction. I was past chairman of the Food Addiction Institute. It's a IRS 501c, been around since 85 or 95 or something. And it's like, those things are triggers. Sweet taste in general are triggers, right? Sweet taste, it's like Pavlov's dogs. You're like, okay, that tastes sweet. Where's my buzz? And then you're not searching out the xylitol or the stevia. You're searching out the real stuff, like an addict getting a beer and say, okay, where's the whiskey? You know what I mean? Same thing. So yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of that stuff, and I think it's dangerous for someone in their first 90 days. What happens with us in our 90 days? I say, if anybody can ever get 90 days of full abstinence, then they never go back. We screw up, like AA will screw up your drinking. This will screw up your sugar, because your skin looks better. You definitely lost some weight. Your brain fog's cleared. You're sleeping better. A lot of things happen really fast. And so, yeah, they may slip and they may be gone for a while, but they're always coming back, because they want this, they really, and it's not me doing it. It's their body showing them that this is better, so yeah.
Well, I'm intrigued. You've got me sold. I've got to go play on your website now. And I've got to convince my husband. That'll be the hard part. Who drinks his 2 or 3 cups of coffee a day, right? I mean, it's just the way that the world is, right? And it's tough. It's really, it's hard to stay sober. It's hard to quit smoking. It's hard to quit doing drugs. It's hard to do all these things, but to have the healthy lifestyle is attainable, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about the coffee thing. Is we found that about 10% to 15% can drink black coffee, but for the most part, the two are, it's like wired together, fired together. You know that term where it's like chocolate is 50-50, caffeine and sugar.
Right.
It's like it's a speedball, That's what John Belushi died of, upper and a downer, right? Yeah. And so same thing with coffee, tea, everything's got mostly prepared with sugar. And so it just, you get the same kind of angst feeling, like I want something sweet, right, when you have the caffeine. But some people can do it, but most can't. So
my husband, when we did one of these diets that we've mentioned previously that I've done,
sure.
Plant-based, all that stuff. And my husband went black. He doesn't drink anything in his. And I don't drink teas. I don't drink tea with sugar. I don't put honey or anything. It's all just straight up. So maybe we're halfway there already.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, look, it's no different than any other recovery. And I think that's the message. And that's the hard part, because, as a marketing guy, this is a product people need, but they don't really want. They don't really want to quit sugar. And they ask the same question you and I asked when we first got in recovery. Do I have to do this for the rest of my life? I can never have a birthday cake, a wedding cake, or, it's like, yeah, you can do it. But, in the last 30 years, I've had what I call 10 accidental ingestations. This is where like someone swears that they made the salad dressing themselves and there's no sugar in it. And then you come to find out it's got agave syrup in it or something like that. And then I'm buzzing, right? And I say, well, all right, I had it. I didn't do it on purpose, but I had it. And I got a little buzz on. But the next day, and even later, I'm starving. I get the craving. I'm hungry for more food when I'm already eating. And then the next day, I'm a little blue. I'm a little down because I just got that big pump, that big shot of dopamine, and my dopamine, I didn't get to start the game with too much. My mother took care of that, God love her. But, it's like I started that with down-regulated dopamine, serotonin and everything to begin with. So when I toy with it, I really get a hit. So, it takes a while to get to, people say it's trite or whatever, but that getting to know your own body, that's, and the journey is inward. And I always thought those sayings were full of shit, right? But come to find out, that's probably where the answer is, And, those guys, the meditators, they can change their heart rate and their temperature and all that kind of stuff. Now I'm starting to believe that the body can be that sensitive to these outside forces that are currently accepted. That you, without guilt or worry, you can give it to a 1-year-old, right? And so it's, we're in a big shift and it's going to take time, but science is here now, and the anecdotal evidence is here now from those 4 offshoot 12-step groups. It works if you remain abstinent. And so look, I don't want to be the anti-candy man, Liz. I mean, I really don't. I don't want to be the
you
guy.
Don't. That nobody likes that.
It's like being the dentist and telling,
So you work it. If you work it, it's worth it, right? And
yeah.
And do you still continue to go to 12-step meetings?
I do, not as much as I did. One of the things in our program is that I really embrace the saying, take what you leave and leave the rest, And I'm not a fan of the spiritual being blended with this. I think that the community is the answer. And I love the community. And I don't ask what their stuff is, their spiritual stuff is. And so we're trying to recreate that online, and, the community, the tribe, and let people choose their own spirituality, and not have it intermingled, if you will. And plus, the task that we have ahead of us is really about the children and the next generation. And it's science-based, right? And the problem with the, AA and stuff is that the grief and the split, if you will, in the community, the recovery community, is that the evidence-based stuff, right? And so it saved my life. Look, I'm not a denier or anything, or I'm not like, whatever, but it's an evolutionary process, like all things, I think. Yeah.
Well, it's been really fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me, and keep doing your good work at 295 or 190. I don't know. You got a lot of episodes in the can. That's amazing. I would love to do that and talk to recovering people all the time. That's really cool.
It's really fun. Well, it's all about getting busy, living sober, and it's living in our own skin. And I think that if you get to that place where you're like, you know what, I quit drinking and I want more. This is like I think I love sugar addiction. I might have to reach out and have you come back on at some point, maybe 90 days from tomorrow. Who knows?
I would love that. No, I mean, I think that there is the recovering folks, they get the addiction part where, like, a new person or a civilian, whatever you want to call them, it takes a while for them to get because they never had an addictive issue with the alcohol or anything else. And so they don't want to think of the word addiction. And I'm a big fan of I don't know if you're familiar with obviously probably are, but the recovery advocacy movement, where they're trying to reduce the stigma, and they call it substitute, addict, junkie, alcoholic, drunk, trying to get the stigmatized words out of the language, which I wholeheartedly support. And for a reason, because now that I'm in this, it's like people don't like that word. They don't like to think about it. When I use the word normie, I'm sure you do too, but people who are not in recovery. And so those folks, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear the addiction thing, right? And they can't make the connection. But someone who's already sober, they can say to themselves, you know what, this shit is treating me like, starting to treat me like the other stuff did. So
It is. It's hard to say no to it. It really
Yeah.
is. And so when you're like, I'm on a diet, and they come up and they're like, here's your chocolate cake with chocolate icing and some scoop of ice cream, and you're like, sure. I've been good all day. I'm going to be bad now. And it's like, instead of playing those games with your head and good and bad and all that, I mean, we could probably go on for hours and hours about that. But it's I'm excited to try this. Hey, you never know.
I'm excited to support you in any way I can. You know, I mean, it's like we got some really cool people in our community. We got some really cool recovering people in our community, people that, you know, been this road before and woke up, whatever, 5, 10, 15 years sober. And they said, where did these 50 pounds come from? Where did this diabetes come from? You know, and they're like, enough's enough. And they're willing to get humble and listen to the idea that this could be a substance use disorder. And we didn't talk a lot about that, but this is truly a substance use disorder. This is not a diet thing. It's not a health thing. It's not a wellness thing. This is a substance use disorder, plain and simple. And the quicker we get that message out, and I think one of the avenues is recovering people, because they are as bad as sugar addicts as everybody else. So, yeah.
Well, we're going to do it one person at a time. So let's hope somebody reaches out to us.
Okay.
Mike, thank you.
Anything I can do, just let me know. I'm around.
Awesome. Well, until next time, everybody. Thanks again, Mike, for coming on. You guys, it's called sugaraddiction.com. Go check it out. I've already checked it out once, but I think I might have to go delve deeper now. And with any questions or comments, please reach out to Bizzy, B-I-Z-Z-Y, at buzzylivingsober.com, and I'll forward your message to Mike. And until next time, keep getting busy, living sober. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. That was awesome.